All right, we are live. All right, we have a special show today. I've got Shari Enger in Minnesota, not Minneapolis, but further down on the border of South Dakota. And we have Cyril, a friend who I haven't seen on camera for 25 years. We went to the American School of The Hague many years ago together. And Cyril now works at Siemens Gamesa out of Whitefish area, right, Cyril?
Yeah, the region kind of centered around.
Yeah, so you got that whole region. And then Shari, your company, you just joined a new company and they do solar and wind, right? What was the name of the company?
Whirl Wind and Solar. So we're based out of Tehachapi, California, and we work all over the United States.
Gotcha. So yeah, this is an interesting because you're into two areas that I love, solar and wind. And then you've been in wind, for many years. And so let's start with that. Let's start with the story of how you got into wind. This you're gonna have to reach back and then kind of walk through your history, Shari. But let's talk about how you got into wind, your story, and then tips for other people trying to get into wind if you want to, and then what your company kind of does too.
All right. So I got into wind about it'll be 20 years in January, and I live in a rural area of Minnesota, and they began building wind farms down here, and I applied for an administrative assistant position with a company that was based out of Louisville, Kentucky, so LG&E Power. Then we actually got sold to FP&L, which is Florida Power and Light, which is now known as NextEra. And I was there for about 7-8 years, moved to Suzlon Wind Energy, worked in finance there for 12 years. And then just recently moved to Whirl Wind and Solar in July and work also in finance there. So Whirl Wind and Solar provides a lot of maintenance people throughout the United States with regards to wind and solar. And our division, which is new to them, is a large corrective team where we work on gearboxes, generators, blades, main bearings, main shafts, sort of a whole package deal, just to expand, what they are already offering. So this is a real good opportunity for growth for all of us, just because of the customer base and the need.
Yeah. Yep. So, and you said it's kind of a unique skill set, right? The people you're looking for to do the maintenance. And I remember us discussing there's some unique qualities. So I think one of them you said was not being scared of heights, and you actually never been up in there.
No, I haven't. In 20 years, I still have not climbed a turbine. I think roller coasters scared me. When I was in junior high, and I'm just not a big heights person at all. But yeah, I would say, it's a special skill set, electronics, engineering. I mean, it's such a broad scope of skill set that you could use within the various jobs that are available in the industry. Anything from engineering to finance to administrative to working on the turbines, but just the scope of work that the technicians actually do can vary widely.
Okay, and your company focuses primarily on the maintenance, you said, right? So somebody else does the install, but then you have kind of a maintenance package, and you go and do repair of the gearboxes, you said, the blades, anything to do with the components. And you mentioned too, some of the components like blades, you need like a crane to come in. You got to rent a crane. And then, but the other components potentially have to be carried up as they climb up the tower. Is that correct?
And they use climb assist,
right.
And all kinds of different, I think it depends upon the weight. I'm sure Cyril can probably answer those questions a whole lot better than I can, being in finance, and just listening to the guys. But yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. Oh, interesting stuff. So Sherry, thank you for that. We're going to come back to you because I want to hear your Power BI story too on the data analysis. But let's jump to Cyril real quick. So Cyril, yeah, we were in the Netherlands together 25 years ago, and then you kind of worked your way into wind eventually, right? So yeah, tell us about your story and how you ended up in.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm definitely a numbers guy, so I I love what you're doing, kind of looking at some of the things at your path. I kind of went into the engineering field. Love the math, statistics, all that. Still do, but then at one point I realized through my internships that I was going to be relying on a computer more to do what I love, um, and it kind of lost, the whole formula. All of that was lost in the software that engineering firms were using, and I kind of lost a little bit of interest and had that travel bug, from living in the Netherlands and all over Europe, etc. So I started kind of looking at what did my dad do and why did we travel, and that was energy. So my first job out of college was at Exxon Mobile, which was an amazing way to start my top-notch training, and I got to travel, I got to live in Korea, and through my travels, I saw wind turbines. In 2003 or 2004, I started getting interested and started putting my resume in, and it took a while to I actually in Houston, Texas, at one point went to the WIA, the American Wind Energy Association conference, and kind of walked the floor and left my resume at Vestas and a few other firms, and Vestas ended up calling me, a couple months later, and I was so excited. I had continued to do the research and just get more and more drawn into the field. So in 2008, I jumped from oil and gas to wind, and it was right around that time where we had kind of two things going on. We had oil prices like $120 oil. Remember those days?
Yeah.
And then didn't know the financial crisis was going to happen, but there was Obama also, and the things he was talking about, renewables. So kind of had two things that made it seem like it made sense, and I had the interest. So jumped to Vestas, moved to Portland, Oregon, which was an amazing city to live in as well.
Yeah.
So my first job, actually, so kind of tying into what Sherry's done, was first job. So I went into project management. So I was out at the fields a lot, climbing turbines.
You
that was
were?
fun. Yeah, so in my 20s, I was always trying to be that guy that shows up on site and can climb with the technicians. Oh yeah, I'm fit. So and it varies. I think it's definitely different climbing a turbine in California, like Northern California. 80-meter tower versus in like freezing cold or super hot Texas. So all that varies, and then you learn the little tricks of the trade, like leaning on the back of the tower, and that helps you
go up.
And then also straight arms, use your legs. So there's all these little tricks that you learn. But then the climb assist, those are those are somewhat new. And so now I sell turbines. Climb assist are standard, so every offer we put out has a climb assist in it.
Gotcha.
But my first job, was gearboxing. So we had, which is a horrible thing. You don't want to be doing that for a turbine supplier, but we had gearbox failures, huge fleet. So you had to track all failing gearboxes. So some of them were proactive, some of them we were doing inspections, of course, seeing that they were going to fail, and then scheduling technicians out all over the nation. Super expensive. You're coordinating people. You're coordinating cranes. At times, it's a big site. You crane from like Newfoundland out to across the country. Mammoth crane because it's the only one or whatever.
Wow.
So anyway, sorry, it's a long story, but
Yeah.
ended up going into project management, of new wind farms. And actually I have kind of two that they're kind of highlighted on my LinkedIn, but the one was the largest wind farm in the world, in Tehachapi at POWERBI, the Alta Wind Energy Center. So all of those Vestas turbines that are there, I was the project manager to supply those turbines and commission those. And then probably my most memorable wind farm, probably the hardest one to put in, because that one got kind of cookie cutter. Once you do one, the first one's hard, and then phase 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, it just gets easier and easier. It's the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And the people are so important. Doki Ridge in British Columbia was the most beautiful site I've ever been to. It's paradise. It's so remote, and it was the most difficult wind farm. I mean, talk about everything thrown at you.
Yeah.
So, and then now I sell turbines. So I've since I left Vestas in 2012, and then joined Gamesa, who then became Siemens Gamesa when we merged with Siemens Wind Power to become just this huge. We're kind of on the order of like Vestas and GE, top 3 wind farm supplier.
Gotcha. Okay. So you've been at Vestas, and then now you're at Siemens Gamesa, and Siemens bought Gamesa, you were saying?
Yeah, it was a merger, but definitely they're the majority shareholder. So I think it's a good mix. I mean, the technology-wise, a lot of the technology is more Gamesa oriented.
Yeah.
And then the management is pretty mixed. There's a good. I mean, Siemens brought so much know-how from their R&D, and we've just improved our wind turbines so much.
So interesting. So is Siemens Gamesa, they do like installs of large systems too? Is that correct? So they make the turbines, and then they do the project management and overall construction planning for.
So we have. Predominantly we're a wind turbine manufacturer. So we have factories all over the world.
Yeah.
And then we also have some sub suppliers that we use, like LM Blades, which is and TPI. But for the most part, we have our own factories. And then we're like what I do. I'm selling wind turbines. So we're kind of turbine supply agreement contracts together with utilities, developers, and we'll supply those. So we take care of obviously the manufacturing, but we'll deliver them to the site.
Yeah.
And then usually it depends. Like in North America, you have big contractors like Morton, Blattner, Minnesota locals. Those are kind of 2 of the big 3 to 5 that usually do the installation for our customers.
Yeah.
But then there's kind of a mixed scope. They'll install them, and then we'll commission them and get them starting up. And then the service depends. We like to do the service, and that's part of. We have a service organization that's massive, that likes to, has a huge fleet that they're servicing and maintaining. But then there's so many amazing service companies that are super competitive that are competing with the suppliers to take that business. Okay. And then some customers do it themselves as well. They have their own service personnel.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So Shari, Cyril, you do big wind turbines, you're doing sales, but your company, gets somebody to install. There's some big installers out there, but you're primarily a manufacturer, but you can help coordinate with project management. And it sounds like there's companies like who you work for, Shari, that afterwards they do the maintenance but you said, Cyril, some people do their own maintenance, right? So that's interesting. Yeah. Yep. And then so Shari, and then the Florida Power and Light, Nextera, and Suzlon, you said, what kind of companies were those? How did they fit into the whole infrastructure too, like?
Okay, so the first company, LG&E, we owned the wind farm. So and Nextera as well owned that in particular wind farm, which so it was a little bit different than being the OEMs with the service contract, because
Okay.
I think when you are actually the owner and you want to make changes or look for improvements and test different things, you have a little bit more flexibility to be able to do that versus being, when I worked at Suzlon, we were an OEM as well, and sold the service contracts with the sale of the turbines, just like Cyril was talking about.
Yeah.
And you always want your availability to be high, and sometimes there can be retrofits and just different things. But I would say Suzlon was that, and now the OEM, and working on getting more third party work being done, and a lot of that group has now transferred. We've started a new division at Whirl Wind and Solar, to be able to go out and do those third party services, like Cyril was talking about with the service providers. There's quite a few that are very good, and you can just sell those services, and you compete for those contracts as well. Wouldn't you agree, Cyril? Yeah,
absolutely.
So knowing your finance, the problem, working on those contracts can be, depending upon the systems that you have available. Just from that financial standpoint, can either be pretty easily done, or like just almost a nightmare, which that turns into my Power BI story. But So
that may be a good segue, because there is a lot of data, and we actually got a couple comments from the audience. So Andrew Elwood, which is actually my middle son, he says hi. And he always watches the show, so it's nice that one time he was in class and he was commenting on my show. So I was like, Andrew, you should be focused on class. And then Tyler Bedhauser. Oh, Shari, you got a model back there?
Well, I'll try and put that in front of right there. So if you haven't seen a wind turbine, and the gearbox, like what he was talking about, is up here, and the generator.
So the gearbox, that's not something small. That's a huge piece, right? So
the nacelle.
And so, Cyril, are there helicopters that do some where you can't get a crane? You got to get a helicopter or something out there to lift it, or
not typical. I mean, I've seen the photos and video.
Yeah.
But I think maybe someday we'll run out of sites, but definitely North America, there's so much land in this country that, and in Canada, that we're still just avoiding all those spots. But I think Scandinavia I've seen some video out of there with some really tough ridgeline sites.
Oh, interesting. So cool. And then Tyler Bedhauser is a good friend of mine who connected with me he's a Power BI guy too. And he's on the other side of the state. Maybe I think he's in the Detroit area. Would love to get my hands on some wind and solar data. I had a manager that worked at Mitsubishi Hitachi Power Systems and was really big on data. So this is really cool. This leads maybe Shari into your Power BI story. Let's jump into that. And then, Cyril, maybe you can jump. I want to have a little fun at the end of this show. We're 18 minutes in. And I want you to tell your story about the kiteboarding and the right. So we'll jump into that at the end of this. Yeah. But Shari, let's. I've heard multiple stories about people. They started with Excel, and you have an interesting story because you started with Power BI when it was called something else, right? And it was inside of Excel. So if you can jump into your story, and I think the key was how long it used to take you to develop the Excel reports based on the data you were getting, and how fast you can do it now with Power BI, right? So the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'll try and keep this pretty short. But I was telling Charles the other day when we were talking about the system at Suzlon that we had, or I should say my former employer. Yep. And it was SAP data, but the problem, it was all good data, but one of the problems was there just really wasn't a good hierarchy built within the system itself of how we wanted to look at the data, whether it be by region, by site location, because we had sites all over the United States, and 1,400 turbines with 25 different managers of that project. Some of those projects were at the same location, and you needed to combine your resources together. It was very difficult to do just out of SAP because the hierarchy wasn't built. But we did that in Excel, a whole lot of VLOOKUPs, creating a whole lot of different tables. Every time somebody said, hey, but I want to see the data this way. And you just go, oh my God, we just got this done. Why didn't you say that?
Yeah.
So I started looking at Power BI, PowerPivot actually, and my laptop just couldn't handle the amount of data. I think I also didn't know enough about it, and not enough time because you're still having to do your day job. And I could have used Access, but I just really didn't want to learn Access. Because I'm taking it out of a database to put it into another database. So PowerPivot would crash my system, and I really just couldn't get anywhere. And one day I was on a webinar with Avi, and now, then they came with Power BI, which was outside of Excel. So it wasn't Excel based, wasn't included in that program. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, now this should probably work. And it did, and the ability to be able to slice and dice your information so many different ways, whether, like I said earlier, the model by dates, by regions, country, endless, basically endless, and what you wanted to look at. So it just really came together very well. Ended up running like 5 different reports, threw them into Power BI, and it's just magical, right? One of the other things is having a lot of history to be able to look at finance or fault codes or the cost of failures or whatever it might be. Your historical information to be able to sort of foresee the future as well when you're looking at contracts or changes to make in your business, and being able to switch things on the fly. Oh, this person is now, these regions are this now, and boom, it's amazing. I don't know how else to say it.
It is. I think that's neat that I think energy has a lot of data, and it's seasonal a lot of times, and it's regional based, especially wind, right? You got the Great Plains with a lot of wind, and then other regions that maybe not has enough. And to be able to segment like that on the fly, like you said, I remember one time I was working with the marketing department, and I had walked in and they were so frustrated. I think they were using Salesforce, and they were battling the reporting and couldn't get the data filtered the way they want it with the time intelligence they needed. And I walked in there and had a meeting, and I was trying to convince them to use Power BI. And I remember they stopped the meeting for a second, and they're like, Charles, can we log into Salesforce right now in Power BI on your laptop? And I turned my laptop around, and they logged in. And I said, okay, let's pick this table out. And then I brought it out, and I pulled a couple of the fields into a visualization. And I think I looked at leads, how many qualified leads were, how many, raw leads there were. And I mapped it out within a few seconds, so they could see their lead data. And I remember jaws just dropping, and everybody in the room was like, this is incredible. And I hadn't even done any time intelligence yet, right? So I was like, wow, this thing is so powerful. Within a few minutes, I can, transform the visually all this data and give insight. So yeah, I love that story, Shari, and I've been hearing so many people tell that similar story about how Power BI has enabled them so quickly to slice and dice in so many different ways. And I love the scheduled refreshes too. You don't have to wait or is this data up to date? It just does it automatically, 8 times a day if you want to, or there's ways for live data now too. So yeah, no, great insights, great story. We may have to do a whole nother show just on your Power BI stories. But I want to switch to Cyril real quick.
We're just Salesforce and Excel.
Yeah, Salesforce.
It looks like we might need some help. I'll talk to my folks.
Yeah, if that's the thing. A lot of people are using Salesforce, and they're like, we have, I've heard of so many companies like we have SAP data, or we have our ERP, we have our Salesforce data over here. We've got a legacy system that we built in, 30 years ago over here, and the data is siloed and disconnected. And the beauty of Power BI is it connects them all together, and then just visualizes the data and keeps it updated. It's such an amazing tool. But that was my question for you: is you use Tableau, ClickView, Power BI, but it sounds like you're using Salesforce and Excel and using the standard tools. Yeah, and it sounds like there's ways that because energy and wind generates so much data. And do you Shari and Cyril? There's probably a lot of data that's being sent down. Is it over Wi-Fi from the gearboxes, from the generator? There's probably a lot of sensors up there, right, that are being pumped down. And then do companies typically have like these dashboards with maps showing each turbine and how they're doing and performing? Is that kind of...
Yeah. I mean, that's from what I've seen. I haven't manipulated the data, but I see that in the definitely like 10-minute average, or there's intervals that it's grabbing the data, and I think that how often it's a lot more than 10 minutes.
Gotcha.
And then they're filtering it somehow, and it is showing up visually on map.
Gotcha. So you have some of those dashboards in place collecting all this data. That's fascinating. I would love to see some of those.
Those are amazing. Those are the pride and joy of, I think there's a company in the Northwest, a large company that's very, very proud of their world-class data center, and it's you need security codes and everything to go in there, and cybersecurity now, of course, is becoming huge.
Yeah, that's what I found too. So I got into the business about a year ago, and security of your data. I don't know. I've signed so many NDAs. I can't even track them because everybody is so worried about keeping the data secure. So that's really important for everybody. So on a lighter note, Cyril, tell us, as kind of a last story, maybe your story about how you got into kiteboarding, and if you have any tips on people getting into kiteboarding, what are they? So
well, kiteboarding, so I got into kiteboarding in my 20s. Actually, in college, I was flying a trainer kite in Bozeman, Montana. And then my first job in Texas, I took my lessons, got on the water, and man, it's exhilarating. It's fun. I did it for 10 years, consistently. It was my favorite thing. And I was an athlete in college too, track and field. But kiteboarding was just fun. It wasn't competitive. It was just something that was absolutely fun. And then it kind of married my job at Wind. And I don't it's a little bit dreamer, romantic, but I think I've always liked to kind of have lifestyle that matches where I live, what I do. And I definitely took my kites on a few business trips. I kited in South Korea. I had a buddy at Exxon Mobile at the time that also kited, and he'd be in like Singapore and I'd be in South Korea, and we would meet somewhere and kite, so that was a lot of fun. And then I got out of it. Oh, so kiting is where I saw my first wind turbines too, actually in Pincher Creek, Alberta. So I was filming, the kiting, and then I included the wind turbines, and I went, man, these things are amazing. They had the Vestas logo on them, and that's kind of how my story in wind started. Then I got out of kiting and it was a little, I kind of got competitive again and went to paddleboarding and was racing those in my 30s. And recently I got back into, it's called wing foiling. So it's a new sport from last year. So it looks like a kite. It's a handheld wing. But what makes it work is what's underwater. There's a hydrofoil, which you've seen the America's Cup, those yachts that are breaking speed records. So they're on a massive hydrofoil. And some really smart people figured out you could design these for, under a surfboard or a paddleboard or a kiteboard. And so we're whizzing around the water on a hydrofoil, and that's where the magic is. So it's like a little airplane that's flying in the water medium, and it's 3-dimensional. And I mean, I don't think we're wired for that. It's like powder skiing, so it's 3-dimensional. So I'm using the power of the wind, and you don't feel the bumps on top of the water. I mean, you know, when you're in windy conditions, those bumps, you know, in a boat, you're just bouncing up and down. But when you're flying underwater, cutting through the water, it's the smoothest, most amazing thing. So I've been doing that, you know, 2020 pretty much through the pandemic. Good social distancing sport, and you know, have a bunch of buddies that we're having a blast.
Wow, incredible story. And you know, maybe we'll do a special episode on all the stuff you're doing. And didn't you paddleboard to work for a while? Was that in? Did I?
Yeah. So if you YouTube it, if you YouTube sub SUP, stand up paddle commute, it comes right up. I had some sponsors that made a cool video. When I lived in Portland, I used to bike to work.
Yeah.
And then one of my colleagues, you know, at Vestas, joked about, hey, someday, you know, if you show up in your wetsuit, that'd be kind of funny with your paddle in hand. And it was a joke, but then I was thinking about it more and more, and I was like, wow, that's a good way to train. That could work. It sounds complicated. Then I figured it out, and it's in the video, but it was the most amazing experience. I did a year round paddle to work.
So hopefully this inspires others to get into some of those sports. It sounds phenomenal. I am going to investigate after this. And then Shari, so you know, when we talked the other day, and this is you know, kind of our closing comments, but you were so passionate about what Power BI has done for you, you know, in your work and stuff, right? And I saw your eyes kind of lit up when you told your Power BI story. So are there any tips on, you know, other people that want to get into Power BI? And you know, I know you and I both took Avi's lessons. You know, we paid for I think, you know, I took the LearnPowerBI program, and then moved into its Pro Plus, which helps you start your own company type of thing. And then, but kind of your journey, and are there any resources, or what are your recommendations on getting started with Power BI? You know, if somebody's out there is wanting to get started.
Sure, I would definitely. I'll give a shout out to Avi's YouTube channel. Take a look at that, because he's got a great. I can't remember what the name of it is. Zero to Dashboard. Take a look at that, and you know, if you're an Excel guru, can make your job so much easier. And even if you don't want to learn Power BI, I will highly suggest learning Power Query, which is within Excel. You can use that within Excel as well. Just what that can give you, the abilities to bring worksheets together. Unpivot, totally my favorite function. But yeah, just if you haven't heard of Power BI, you haven't taken the time, take some time, and always remember, and Avi this is one of his signature things, is know the who, what, when, where, and how. And that you answer those questions of what you're looking for in accordance with your data, and you've got it built. I mean, it's right there. It can be either simple or pretty hard, you know.
I think you're right. I think I second everything you're saying, because with Avi, I learned, you know, you hear about the DAX wall. Everyone's like, oh, I can't get past the DAX wall. But if you take Avi's courses and his way of organizing the data in Power Query in M, it makes everything so easy. It's almost embarrassingly easy is how I tell people. It's like, if you build the data model right with the who, what, when, where, why, and the star schema, the whole world in terms of, you know, data insights just opens up for you so easily. So thanks for that insight, Shari. I think those tips will help. You know, and after some of these videos, sometimes you'll get LinkedIn messages for people, you know, wanting some advice on Power BI. And Cyril, hopefully some people get started in, you know, getting into the wind industry, and helping with wind maintenance too, Shari. And then also kiteboarding and paddleboarding, right? I'm definitely going to get started.
Nice balance. Work hard, play hard.
Yeah, work hard, play hard. That sounds great. So I'm going to end the broadcast, and then Shari and Cyril, if we can hang around just for a quick recap, that'll be awesome. So